What is going on, guys? Gaston right here, back at you with another video, and today we're going to be talking about a bunch of Canon rumors when it comes to cinema cameras. Canon has been out of control, guys. So if you're a Canon fanboy, this video is for you. If you're a Canon cinema fanboy, this video is for you. If you're a Canon cinema fanboy and you cannot afford the cinema cameras, this video is for you. Welcome back to the channel, guys. Gaston right here, and if you're new to this place, I do gear reviews, tutorials, behind the scene, and I've been covering a lot of rumors. So if you like the content around this channel, consider subscribing and also enable notifications for more content like this one. Let's actually start talking about the very first camera, and I have a list of all the cameras right here. Thanks to Canon Rumor for leaking this information. So the first one talks about a super 35mm 4K sensor camera, borrowing the same sensor from the C200. Now, this camera is not going to have IBIS, and it's going to have an RF mount. Now, this is great news, guys, because I've been eyeing the C300 Mark III, and one of the reasons why that actually stopped me from buying that camera, well, number one, the money, and number two is that I sold all my EF glass long time ago, and I have a lot of RF glass right now. So having RF, I think is going to be a wise decision to wait for that camera than buying a C300, and I'm sure that there are a lot of people on the same boat. Now, next up, this camera is going to feature 10 stop of ND filters built in. Now, having ND filter built in your camera is going to be really good, especially if you're going to be using this camera for running and gunning situations. You know, you're going to be able to change your exposure without altering the settings, and it's also going to allow you to shoot with super fast glass and get that super shallow depth of field that we all love. So pretty good there. Now, this camera is also going to have C-Log 2 and C-Log 3, a very much requested feature, and I think any cinema camera should have it by default, and these ones are no different. Now, we have some information that is not such a good news for this camera, and the first one is that this camera is going to have 2 SD cards, and that's not the bad news. I mean, it's pretty good, you know, entry-level cinema camera, 2 SD cards. You're going to be able to record onto them. But this camera is going to do 4K 60, and that's going to be it, and then you're going to have 120 in 1080p. So we're not getting anything cinematic here, anything like we don't have in the hybrid cameras, you know, smaller DSLR type of body. So that's that. But the sad part is that it's going to do an 8-bit 420. So that's that. Now, I say it's sad because the price is not cheap for this camera. Okay, and I'm going to talk about the price in just a moment. Now, the other piece of information that we know is that this camera is not going to have RAW capabilities. So if you want to shoot RAW, buy a proper cinema camera. This camera is going to use the same battery as the Canon EOS R5. It's going to have 2 of them, LP 6NH battery, and I think it's a pretty good call there because it's going to be a smooth transition for all the people, you know, that own already those cameras, the R, the R5, the R6, or any Canon camera that uses that battery, the LP6N, which also is gonna work, and just simply use them. Let's talk about the price, because I told you that the price is not super cheap. This camera is going to be $3,500, okay? Yes, $3,500 for a camera that is gonna shoot 4K 60, 120 in 1080, and it's gonna do at 8-bit 420. So what do you think about this camera? You may have all the interfaces, you know, from a cinema camera, all the buttons, the ND filters, but is that going to be good enough for you to spend $3,500? I would like to know what you guys think. Let me know in the comments. Now, let's talk about the second camera, and let's call this one that we're going to be talking about right now the C300 RF, okay, or the RF CRF, just for the sake of naming this camera. Now, this one is going to have the Super 35 4K DGO sensor, same as the C300 Mark III. Pretty good right there. It's not going to have IBIS. Now, when they're saying that the camera is not going to have IBIS, I don't know if they were talking about no mechanical sensor image stabilization, and perhaps we may see digital stabilization like we see in some of the, you know, more expensive cinema cameras. So none of that information is actually clear right now, and we're going to be reporting as we go. Now, this camera is going to have the 10-stop neutral density as well, just like the first camera. So again, a very much welcome feature. Now, when it comes to 4K capabilities, this camera is going to come way ahead from the other camera because this one is going to capture 4K up to 120 frames per second and also 180 frames per second in 2K. This camera is going to record onto 2 internal SD cards, and you're going to do it at 10-bit 422. That's pretty good. Also, the rumor talks about that this camera at launch is not going to have RAW capabilities. So that means that this camera may have RAW capabilities via firmware update, or maybe they're going to try to sell you a module that you have to stick to the camera and maybe make you spend another $1,500 or $2,000 just for RAW capabilities. Hopefully it's going to be only firmware. Now, this camera is going to be powered with a BPA battery, and we're starting to see this camera looking more like a real cinema camera. Now, let me tell you about the price of this camera, and hold on to yourself, because this camera is going to go for $6,300. Now, I have my personal opinion about the right price for this camera, and again, we don't know all the features about the camera, but I think that this camera should be around the $5,000, $4,800 top. 5,000 top. Let me know in the comments down below, guys, what do you think about the price? All right, so let's talk about these two 1-inch sensor cameras. These are going to be remakes, and the first camera is the XF505. This one is going to replace the 205. It's going to have the same sensor, 1-inch sensor from the XF705. It's going to 12G SDI output and SD cards. It's going to have an integrated zoom lens of 15x. We don't know the actual focal length or the aperture of this lens, and it's going to have the BPA battery as well. Now, the second camera, and this one I own the prior version, is going to be the XC20. And this camera is going to be replacing the XC10 and the XC15. Now, I like the XC15. I actually use it at home for my overhead shots, for my older videos. It's a pretty good camera, pretty good 4K capabilities, but it's a 1-inch sensor, right? Now, this camera is also going to have the same 1-inch sensor from the XF705. This camera is going to have one CF Express slot for internal RAW recording. Great, but it's going to be with a 1-inch sensor, so the dynamic range, I don't know. And then it's going to have SD card for, additional recording in MP4. Also, it's going to have an integrated zoom lens, and this one is going to have a constant aperture of f2.8, and it's going to be at 10x. So you're not going to be able to detach the lens. And this camera is also going to use the LP6NH batteries, the same battery as the EOS R5 and EOS R6. So here we have 4 entry-level cinema cameras. I wouldn't consider the 1-inch sensor cinema cameras, more like B or C cameras, and the other ones, can be considered seriously. I don't know about the first one, a 420 8-bit. I don't know, guys. There are a lot of cameras right now that can do a lot more than that. Yes, you don't have the ND filters yet, you don't have all the configurable buttons that you have in a cinema body, but I don't know. Let me know in the comments down below. So this is going to wrap it up for today, guys. As you guys have seen, Canon hasn't been sleeping. They've been working really hard, and they're releasing some products, and some products are not making a lot of sense to me. Some products seems very promising. So let me know what you think about these 4 cameras. Drop your comments down below. And as always, guys, if you enjoy this content, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel for more content like this one, and also don't forget to enable notifications. Until then, guys, see you in the next video.